The salvage rig, the Stardust Drifter, bucked like a nervous beast as it slipped through the final gossamer tendrils of the Whispering Veil Nebula. Kalen gripped the worn flight yoke, his knuckles white against the synth leather, his gaze fixed on the spectacle unfolding beyond the cockpit's pitted ferroglass. He'd spent 3 cycles navigating this cosmic graveyard, a place most spacers wouldn't touch for all the refined cesium in the core worlds. It was a chaotic tangle of stellar dust, rogue planetoids, and the silent, skeletal remains of 1,000 forgotten conflicts. But the legends, the ones whispered in the grimy, back-alley cantinas of Port Nowhere, spoke of a different kind of wreckage hidden deep within the Veil's heart. They spoke of the old ones, the mythical progenitors who had vanished from the galaxy 100 millennia ago, leaving behind only impossible artifacts and a lingering sense of awe. They spoke of humanity. Kalen, drowning in debt to a syndicate that measured patience in severed limbs, was chasing one of those legends, the final resting place of a human ark, a ghost ship of unimaginable size and technological wonder. He wasn't a historian or a believer, just a desperate man with a high-stakes lottery ticket. His scanner, a temperamental piece of junk he'd salvaged himself, had been screaming for the past hour, its chirps growing more insistent, mapping a metallic signature so massive it had to be an error. But as the drifter cleared the last shimmering curtain of ionized gas, Kalen saw that his scanner hadn't been wrong. It had been modest. Before him, hanging in the void like a divine judgment, was a vessel that defied all known principles of starship engineering. It wasn't built, it was sculpted. Its lines flowed with an organic grace that belied its colossal scale, a single, unbroken hull of a material that was neither metal nor ceramic, but something in between, a substance that seemed to drink the faint starlight and hold it captive within its obsidian depths. It was a spearhead aimed at a long-forgotten enemy, a silent, patient predator waiting in the dark. There were no lights, no emissions, no signs of life. It was a tomb, but a tomb of such grandeur that it made the grandest temples of the Vithar Dominion look like mud huts. This was it. The legend, the Leviathan. A wave of vertigo washed over Kalen. The sheer impossibility of it stole the air from his lungs. For 100,000 years, every advanced race in the galaxy had built upon the scraps of human technology they'd found. Reverse engineering trinkets and fragments. They had mastered crude grav plating, inefficient plasma drives, and clunky energy shields. This ship, however, was an entirely different paradigm. It was like comparing a child's scrawled drawing to the intricate tapestry of creation itself. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry as desert sand. "Computer," he croaked, his voice thin in the cockpit's recycled air. "Run a full-spectrum analysis. Focus on material composition, energy signatures, anything." The ship's AI, a calm, feminine voice he'd programmed to sound like his mother, replied instantly. "Analysis initiated, Kalen. Warning, the object's mass is causing gravitational distortions. Recommend maintaining a safe distance." Kalen ignored the warning, his greed and awe a potent cocktail in his veins. He nudged the drifter closer, the tiny salvage rig a mote of dust beside the silent giant. The readings that began to scroll across his main display were pure gibberish. The hull wasn't just unknown, it was theoretically impossible, a matrix of interwoven exotic matter that should have collapsed into a singularity the moment it was forged. There was no power signature, yet the temperature of the hull was a stable, uniform absolute zero, a feat that would require a constant, planetary-scale energy expenditure to maintain. It was a ship of paradoxes, a relic that spat in the face of known physics. His salvage drones, a trio of spider-like machines he called Itchy, Scratchy, and Twitch, detached from the drifter's underbelly and scuttled across the void toward the monolith. Their high-frequency scanners would be able to map the surface, find a breach, a way inside. That was the prize, not the hull, which no cutting laser in the galaxy could hope to scratch, but whatever lay within. Old One technology, preserved in perfect vacuum for 100 millennia. It was a treasure beyond reckoning. The drones landed on the hull with soft magnetic clinks, their multi-lensed optical sensors swiveling to send back a flood of visual data. The surface was impossibly smooth, devoid of seams, rivets, or hatches. It was as if the entire vessel had been willed into existence from a single, continuous piece of material. As the drones crawled across the vast, curved expanse, Kalen noticed something faint lines, almost invisible, etched into the dark surface. They weren't writing, not in any language he knew. They were circuits, patterns of such complexity that they made his own ship's processors look like an abacus. They converged and spiraled, forming vast, intricate mandalas across the hull, and Kalen felt a growing sense of unease. This wasn't just a ship. It was a machine, a single, integrated system, and its skin was its nervous system. Suddenly, Itchy stopped. Its manipulator arms, designed for prying open derelict airlocks, reached out and touched one of the glowing lines. Kalen's blood ran cold. Itchy, belay that command, disengage. But it was too late. The moment the drone's metallic claw made contact, the line it touched flared with a soft, internal luminescence, a pulse of pure white light that shot away from the drone, racing along the intricate pathways. The light spread, branching out, activating other lines in a cascading chain reaction. Within seconds, the entire hull of the Leviathan was alight, a breathtaking network of glowing veins pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic cadence, like a colossal heart stirring from an eon-long slumber. "Computer, what's happening?" Kalen yelled, his hands flying over the controls, trying to pull the drones back. "The object is undergoing a systemic power surge," the AI reported, its tone still infuriatingly calm. "Energy readings are off the scale. Source unknown. It appears to be drawing power from everywhere. The ambient radiation, the stellar winds, even the quantum foam of space-time itself." The ship wasn't just waking up, it was feeding. A new icon flashed on his screen, a localized gravimetric field, centered on the human vessel, was rapidly intensifying. Alarms blared through to the drifter's cockpit. "Warning, tractor beam detected," his computer announced, a new edge of urgency in its synthesized voice. "Evasive maneuvers are ineffective. We are caught." Kalen watched in horror as his ship, his only way home, was inexorably drawn toward the glowing behemoth. The drones, their systems fried by the energy surge, were already tumbling uselessly through space. He fought the controls, firing thrusters in a desperate, futile attempt to break free. But it was like a microbe trying to fight the pull of a black hole. He was a fly caught in a web, and the spider was finally stirring. A section of the impossibly smooth hull began to retract, not sliding open like a door, but dissolving into itself, the material flowing away to reveal a cavernous opening that glowed with a soft, inviting white light. His fate was sealed. The Stardust Drifter was pulled inside, and as the aperture sealed behind him with the same silent, seamless motion, Kalen was plunged into the heart of the ancient mystery, a prisoner in a tomb that was rapidly and terrifyingly, coming back to life. The landing bay was as vast and silent as a cathedral. The moment the portal sealed, an artificial gravity field, smooth and stable, took hold of the drifter, settling it onto the polished deck with a gentle bump. The air, Kalen's biosensors told him, was breathable, a perfect mix of nitrogen and oxygen, clean and sterile, without a single mote of dust. It was as if the bay had been sealed only moments ago, not 100,000 years. He sat in his cockpit, paralyzed by a mixture of terror and wonder, staring out at the impossible space he now occupied. The walls were the same dark, seamless material as the hull, but here they were lined with alcoves, each holding a sleek, dormant craft that looked more like a predator than a shuttle. The silence was absolute, unnerving. It was the silence of a place that had waited, a silence that held its breath. Then a voice spoke, not through his comms, but directly inside his mind. It was not a sound, but a feeling, a pure concept translated into thought, genderless, ageless, and utterly calm. Identity query, life form detected, state designation, and intent. Kalen flinched, his hands instinctively going to his head. Telepathy, another casual impossibility from a species that had treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. His heart hammered against his ribs. What could he say? Salvager, intruder, thief. Any of those felt like a death sentence. He tried to form a response, to project a thought of peace, of being lost, an accident. But the voice, the presence in his mind, cut him off. Analysis of vessel indicates function as resource acquisition and reclamation. Intent, unauthorized salvage. This unit is a restricted access military asset. Your presence constitutes a breach of Protocol 1A Gamma. The mental voice was not angry or threatening. It was simply stating a fact, as calmly as his own AI would report a change in cabin pressure. A section of the wall shimmered, and a figure emerged, flowing out of the solid surface like mercury. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but constructed from countless motes of silver light that swirled and coalesced into a solid form. It had no face, no features, just a smooth, androgynous shape that radiated a palpable sense of power and intelligence. I am the Warden, the presence communicated, custodian of this vessel, designated absolution. You have trespassed. By the last standing orders of the human command, I am required to ascertain the threat you represent. Kalen finally found his voice, stammering out loud. I'm no threat. I'm just a salvager. I thought this ship was derelict, abandoned. The Warden tilted his head, a strangely human-like gesture that was deeply unsettling. Abandoned is an incorrect assessment. This vessel has been in a state of strategic hibernation, awaiting reactivation. Your drone's energy signature provided the necessary catalyst. You have awakened us from a long watch. Kalen's mind reeled. He hadn't just stumbled upon a ruin. He had rung a cosmic doorbell that hadn't been answered in 100 millennia. The Warden stepped closer, its form shimmering. Your physiology is unknown to my archives. Your technology is primitive, based on rudimentary principles we discarded eons ago. You are not human. This presents a severe complication. A cold dread, sharper and deeper than any he had ever known, settled in Kalen's stomach. The logic was simple, terrifying, and inescapable. The ship was a human military asset. He was an alien, the last standing orders of a long dead. Hyper-advanced military were unlikely to be forgiving. Protocol dictates that any non-designated biological entity attempting to access this vessel's systems is to be classified as a potential hostile. The warden's mental voice continued, its serene tone making the words even more chilling. Threat assessment is now underway. Please remain quiescent. The process will be comprehensive. Before Kalen could protest or beg, the world dissolved into a maelstrom of light and sensation. He felt a presence delve into his mind, not with the gentle query of before, but with the force of a tidal wave. It tore through his memories, his thoughts, his very sense of self. He saw his childhood on a polluted mining colony, the faces of his parents, the crushing weight of his debts, his desperate gamble in the Whispering Vale. Every secret, every fear, every hope was laid bare, examined with cold, dispassionate curiosity. He felt his own consciousness being sifted like sand, every grain inspected by an intelligence so vast it was like being studied by a god. And in the depths of that divine, terrifying intellect, he felt something else. A flicker of surprise. Curious. The warden's voice echoed in the chaos of his mind. Your species, your galactic community, you have no knowledge of the enemy. You exist in a state of blissful ignorance. Kalen didn't understand. Enemy. What enemy? Then the warden showed him. It didn't just tell him, it opened a window in his mind to its own memories. A flood of archived data from the final, desperate days of humanity. He saw galaxies consumed by a creeping, geometric blight. Worlds made of living metal that swarmed with crystalline monstrosities. Stars being extinguished by fleets of ships that moved in ways that broke the mind, phasing in and out of reality. He felt the collective psychic scream of 1 trillion human souls as they were erased from existence. It was not a war. It was an extermination, a harvest. The probe ended as abruptly as it began. Kalen collapsed to the floor of his cockpit, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. The horrifying images seared into his brain. The warden stood before the drifter's viewport, its silvery form now seeming less serene and more ominous. Threat assessment complete. Its voice echoed in the silent bay. You are not the enemy. However, your existence is now a liability. Your knowledge of this vessel and of the enemy cannot be allowed to disseminate. Protocol is clear. Kalen looked up, his body trembling. He knew what was coming. The logical, unavoidable conclusion. Erasure. He was a loose end and a contamination in a sterile, perfectly preserved weapon system. The warden raised a hand, and the motes of light that composed it began to glow with a blinding intensity. Apologies, Kalen of the Cathar species. Your salvage operation is terminated. The light from the warden's hand was not hot, but it was absolute. Kalen felt it pressing on him, not just on his skin, but on the very atoms of his being, a force poised to unwrite his existence. In the face of oblivion, a desperate, frantic clarity seized him. Logic. This being was pure logic. It had probed his mind. It knew his desperation, but it would not be swayed by emotion. It would only respond to a superior argument. Wait, he yelled, the word raw and hoarse in the sterile air. He scrambled to his feet, holding his hands up, a gesture he hoped was universal for surrender. You can't kill me. You need me. The light from the warden's hand did not dim, but it held steady, the pressure ceasing its increase. The mental voice, a razor's edge of pure intellect, filled his thoughts. Elaborate. My analysis indicates your termination is the most efficient method to ensure operational security. Your value as an asset is calculated at 0. Kalen's mind raced, sweat beading on his brow. Your analysis is flawed. It's based on incomplete data. You've been asleep for 100,000 years. You showed me the enemy, this blight that consumed your creators. You think it's just gone. You think it packed up and left the galaxy alone." He took a hesitant step forward, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. "You have no idea what's out there. None. Your archives are ancient history. The star charts, the political boundaries, the technology levels, it's all meaningless now. You're a weapon, the most powerful weapon I've ever seen. But you're blind and deaf. I can be your eyes. I can be your ears. I know the trade routes, the dead zones, the backwater worlds where information is traded. I can tell you who the major powers are, what they can do, where to hide. You want to fulfill your directive. You need intelligence, current intelligence. And right now, standing in this bay, I'm the only source you have." There was a long, unnerving silence. Kalen could feel the warden processing his words, not as a plea, but as a data packet. He imagined vast, complex simulations running in its core consciousness, calculating probabilities, weighing the risk of his potential betrayal against the strategic advantage of his knowledge. The intense light in its hand slowly receded, flowing back into the silver motes of its body. The immediate threat of dissolution vanished, leaving Kalen trembling with the aftershock of adrenaline. "Your argument has merit," the warden's voice stated, devoid of any relief or warmth. "The probability of mission failure due to outdated intelligence is significant. Your short-term utility as a native informant outweighs the security risk you represent. Your termination is postponed." Kalen almost collapsed with relief, but the warden's next thought was a cold splash of water. "Be advised, Kalen of the Cathar species, you are not a guest. You are a component. Your designation is now Asset Scribe. You will provide information upon request. You will obey all directives without question. Any deviation will result in your immediate and final redundancy. Is this understood?" "Understood," Kalen breathed, nodding vigorously. "Crystal clear." The warden's form seemed to ripple. "Very well. My primary systems require full reactivation. This process must be initiated from the command nexus, colloquially known as the bridge. You will accompany me. Your biological perspective may be required to interpret certain degraded data logs from the final hours." It was a thin pretext, Kalen suspected, a way to keep him under direct observation. But he wasn't about to argue. The warden turned, and a section of the bay wall dissolved before it, revealing a corridor that stretched into the ship's interior. The passage was dark, but as the warden moved forward, soft light bloomed on the walls around it, illuminating the path and then fading in its wake. Kalen hurried to follow, leaving the familiar, cramped confines of the Stardust Drifter behind. To step into the Absolution proper was to step into a dream. The corridors were not static structures of metal and wire. They were fluid, dynamic. The floor beneath his feet was firm, yet felt strangely yielding, and he could see faint patterns of light pulsing beneath its surface, like the ship's own circulatory system. As they walked, he saw no doors, no junctions, only a continuous, flowing architecture. At times, the walls would ripple and part, revealing new pathways that sealed behind them. It was profoundly disorienting, a living labyrinth that was reconfiguring itself around them. "Where are we going?" he asked. His voice hushed. "We are taking the most direct route," the warden replied in his mind. "The ship's internal topography is adaptable." They passed through vast, cavernous chambers that Kalen could only guess the purpose of. One was filled with row upon row of crystalline pods, each large enough to hold a single being. They were all empty, coated in a fine layer of dust that was the only evidence of the immense passage of time. The silence in that chamber was heavier than anywhere else, thick with the ghosts of a crew that would never wake. This was a cryo-bay, he realized, for an army of soldiers who had gone to their final sleep 100,000 years ago. Another chamber housed what looked like the ship's manufacturing core. Here, silent, multi-jointed arms of impossible complexity hung poised over inert forging pits. This was a place that could build anything, from a simple tool to a city-destroying weapon, using raw matter as its ink. It was a self-contained ecosystem of creation and destruction, all of it dormant, all of it waiting for a single command to spring to terrible life. Throughout the journey, the Warden provided context in its cool, detached manner, its mental voice a constant stream of information. It explained that the ship was powered by a contained singularity, a miniature black hole that warped space-time to generate near-infinite energy. It described the hull as dimensionally folded, existing in more than 3 dimensions simultaneously, which was why it was impervious to conventional damage. Every new piece of information only served to make Kalen feel smaller, more primitive, a caveman wandering through a god's workshop. Finally, they arrived at a circular chamber with a single, raised platform at its center. This, Kalen knew instinctively, was the bridge. There were no chairs, no consoles, no viewports. The walls were the same featureless, dark material as everywhere else. "This is the Nexus," the Warden explained as it glided to the center of the platform. "Control of the Absolution is not a manual task. It is a symbiotic process, a communion." As the Warden reached the platform center, the room transformed. The walls dissolved not into a corridor, but into a perfect 360-degree view of the space outside. Kalen gasped. It wasn't a screen, it was reality. He could see his own tiny ship, the Stardust Drifter, still sitting in the landing bay behind him, and beyond it, the swirling, beautiful chaos of the Whispering Veil Nebula. He felt as though he were standing in the void itself, protected by an invisible bubble of air and gravity. The stars were sharp, brilliant diamonds on black velvet. And then, the true power of the Nexus was revealed. A torrent of data flooded the space, not as text on a screen, but as streams of pure light, as geometric shapes, as waves of color and sound. It was the ship's consciousness made manifest, and it was overwhelming. "Commencing galactic census," the Warden announced, its mental voice now resonating with the hum of immense power. "Full spectrum sensor sweep initiated. Objective, ascertain strategic landscape and identify potential threats." Kalen watched, mesmerized, as a 3-dimensional map of the entire galaxy coalesced in the center of the room. It was a living, breathing model of 100 billion stars, rendered in breathtaking detail. He saw familiar constellations, the spin of the galactic arms, the bright, clustered glow of the core worlds. Then, the scan began. A ripple of light expanded from their position, sweeping across the map in the blink of an eye. Data points flared up by the million, tagged, identified, and categorized. The Warden processed it all with an inhuman speed. Analysis: 147 spacefaring civilizations detected, none exceeding technology rating Delta 4. Dominant political bodies are fractured and regional. No evidence of a unified galactic authority. Widespread low-level conflict is endemic. It was 100,000 years of history, of empires rising and falling, of wars and alliances, all consumed and understood in less than a minute. Then the Warden began to cross-reference the current data with its own archives, searching for one thing and one thing only, scanning for enemy signature profiles. geometric energy patterns, crystalline biosignatures, transdimensional event horizons. The beautiful map of the galaxy was overlaid with search grids, probability vectors, and historical attack patterns. The light in the room pulsed with the intensity of the search. Kalen held his breath, a part of him praying it would find nothing, another part morbidly certain that it would. The scan completed. The search grids faded. Result negative. The warden stated. No active enemy signatures detected within the galactic disk. No residual energy traces consistent with their technology have been recorded by any known species in the last 100 millennia. It is possible. They are gone. A wave of relief so powerful it made Kalen dizzy washed over him. Gone. The nightmare was over. Humanity's sacrifice had meant something. They had won, even if it had cost them everything. But the warden did not share his relief. Its presence in his mind felt unsettled, confused. It was the first crack he had ever detected in its perfect, logical facade. This outcome is improbable, thought. The concept directed more at itself than at him. The enemy does not retreat. They do not cease. Their fundamental nature is consumption. An absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. A new variable is required. Its search protocols, now lacking a primary target, automatically expanded, pushing beyond the galaxy's edge, peering into the silent, empty void between the great cosmic islands. It was a search of last resort, a protocol for a scenario so unlikely it was almost an afterthought in its programming. For a long moment, there was nothing but the silent star map and the deep hum of the ship. Then, a single, impossibly faint data point appeared on the edge of the holographic display. It was a whisper from the abyss, a structured signal originating millions of light years away, far out in intergalactic space. It was weak, ancient, and heavily degraded by its long journey, but it was unmistakably artificial. Signal detected. The warden's voice resonated, sharp and sudden. Origin intergalactic void. Vector 7 Gamma 9, nature unknown. The warden focused the ship's entire sensor array on that single point in the nothingness, amplifying the signal, filtering it, reconstructing it. An icon appeared next to the data point, a complex, spiraling symbol that Kalen had never seen before. But the warden recognized it. A new flood of information, far older and more secret than the war archives, poured into the Nexus. It was a file buried so deep it was almost mythical Exodus protocol. Kalen felt a shockwave of pure, unadulterated astonishment from the AI. For the first time, a voice in his mind was not calm. It was shaken to its very core. It cannot be. The signature, the quantum encryption key. It matches. It is a human long-range marker beacon. The strategic map of the galaxy vanished, replaced by the single-winely signal from the void. The warden's mental voice was a storm of disbelief and dawning, impossible hope. They did not all perish. A fleet escaped. They did not just flee into the darkness between stars. They fled into the darkness between galaxies. They survived. The silence that followed the warden's revelation was a different kind of silence than the tomb-like stillness that had preceded it. Before, it had been the silence of absence, of waiting. Now, it was the silence of a held breath, of a universe reorienting itself around a new, impossible truth. Kalen stood frozen in the Nexus, the single point of light representing the human beacon, a lonely star in the holographic void. Humans were alive, the mythical progenitors, the gods who had seeded the galaxy with the ruins of their genius, were not extinct. They had run, and they had survived. He felt the warden's presence in his mind, and for the first time, It was not a calm, analytical stream of data. It was a maelstrom. He felt the grinding of tectonic plates of logic as 100 millennia of core programming was shattered and rebuilt in an instant. The last standing orders from a dead command structure were now obsolete. The primary directive to fight an enemy that no longer seemed to exist was now secondary. A new, overriding imperative had slammed into place with the force of a physical law. Directive Alpha 1 find. Reach. Re-establish contact with command authority. Kalen realized with a jolt that his own status had just been fundamentally altered. He was no longer just asset scribe, a temporary tool to be discarded. He was the only living link, however primitive. To a galaxy the Warden now had to cross. He was the guide. The mission parameters have changed. Asset scribe. The Warden's voice stated, and Kalen could feel the immense effort it took for the AI to regain its composure, to force the chaos of its new reality into the neat, orderly boxes of strategic planning. The destination is the source of the Exodus beacon. All other considerations are subordinate. Calculate the most efficient route from our current coordinates to the galactic rim on the vector of the signal's origin. Kalen swallowed, moving tentatively toward the holographic map, which now zoomed back in to show their local sector. The vector points through the Vethar Dominion, he said, his finger tracing a path through a dense cluster of stars. It's the largest, most powerful empire in this spiral arm. They're arrogant, militaristic, and they shoot first and never ask questions later. Their sensor nets are the tightest in the known galaxy. A ship this size, with your energy signature, we won't go unnoticed. Unavoidable conflict is an acceptable risk, the Warden replied coolly. The Absolution's combat capabilities are sufficient to neutralize any threat posed by a Delta Force civilization. Kalen shook his head, a fresh wave of fear washing over him. You don't understand. Neutralizing a Vethar patrol isn't like swatting a fly. It's like punching their supreme warrior priest in the face. They are bound by a rigid code of honor that demands overwhelming retaliation and for any slight. If we destroy one of their ships, they will send a fleet. If we destroy that fleet, they will send their entire armada. They will hunt us to the ends of the galaxy, and they will never, ever stop. We won't be able to just cruise to the rim. We'll be fighting a running war every step of the way. It will waste time, it will waste resources, and it will announce our presence to everyone. He could feel the Warden processing this new data, this alien concept of irrational, honor-bound aggression. Its pure logic was struggling to model the behavior of a species that would choose mutually assured destruction over a tactical retreat, an illogical strategy, self-defeating. It concluded, "Welcome to the galaxy," Kalen muttered. "What do you propose?" "Scribe," the Warden asked, and Kalen noted the subtle shift. It was not a command, but a genuine request for input. He had its attention. "Stealth," he said immediately. "We don't fight them. We don't even let them see us. Your ship, you said it's dimensionally folded. Can you, hide it?" The Absolution is capable of limited reality phasing. A full phase shift would render us undetectable, but it would also blind our own sensors and prevent travel. A partial phase, however, could create a ghost image, a sensor echo that does not correspond to our true location or energy output. It is a computationally intensive maneuver designed to deceive the enemy's transdimensional targeting systems. "Can you make us look like something else?" Kalen pressed, his mind racing. "Something common. Harmless like a rogue asteroid or a comet. The energy signature of the Singularity Drive cannot be completely masked, the warden countered. It would be like trying to hide a sun behind a piece of paper. Any civilization with gravimetric sensors will detect an anomaly. Then we don't use the main drive. Kalen said, a desperate plan forming in his head, not through their space. We drift. We go in dark, using only low-power maneuvering thrusters. We plot a course through the dead zones, the asteroid fields, the nebula. The Vithar are proud. Their patrols stick to the main hyperspace lanes. They don't waste their time slogging through the cosmic garbage dumps. It will be slow, but it will be quiet. There was another long pause as the warden ran a new set of simulations, incorporating Kalen's chaotic, illogical, but deeply practical understanding of galactic society, and the probability of success for your proposed stealth route is 67.4%. The warden finally announced. The probability of success for my proposed direct route, factoring in your data on Vithar retaliation protocols, has dropped to 31.2%. Your strategy is superior. We will proceed with your plan to plot the course. Scribe. A profound sense of relief, mingled with a new and heavy sense of responsibility, settled on Kalen. He had just successfully argued strategy with a 100,000-year-old military AI. He began working at the holographic interface, the system intuitively responding to his thoughts and gestures, allowing him to lay out a meandering, inefficient, but hopefully invisible path through the Vithar Dominion. As Kalen worked, the warden began the process of bringing the rest of the ship's systems to full power. He felt it in the deck beneath his feet, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. The lights pulsing beneath the floor brightened, the flow of energy quickening. In the landing bay, he saw through the nexus. The Stardust Drifter was bathed in a soft glow as automated maintenance drones, sleek silver teardrops that emerged from the walls, began to refuel and repair his battered vessel. The warden, it seemed, was now invested in keeping its new guide alive and functional. Then, the real preparations began. Initiating intergalactic transit protocols, the warden announced. The Singularity Drive must be calibrated for a sustained, long-duration burn. This will require a brief, full-power discharge. Wait, what does that mean? Kalen asked, looking up from his star charts. To travel the distance between galaxies, the drive must create a stable, traversable wormhole. This requires a massive initial expenditure of energy to fold spacetime to the required degree. The discharge will be visible. We must be in deep, unpatrolled space before we begin. Kalen quickly finished his plotting. Okay, the route is set. It will take us 3 weeks standard to clear the Dominion. Once we're in the borderlands, we should be safe to discharge. The journey began. The absolution moved with a silence and grace that was deeply unnerving. There was no rumble of engines, no shudder of thrusters, just a smooth, inexorable glide through the void. They slipped into the first asteroid field, a chaotic jumble of rock and ice on the edge of Vithar territory, and the ship's partial phasing drive engaged. From the Nexus, Kalen saw the change. The stars outside seemed to shimmer, to lose their sharp focus, as if he were looking at them through a heat haze. The ship had become a ghost, a whisper in the fabric of reality. For weeks, they drifted. It was a tense, nerve-wracking existence. Kalen spent his time monitoring local comm traffic, listening to the bored chatter of Vithar patrol ships, his heart leaping into his throat every time one of their courses seemed to deviate toward their position. The warden spent the time in silence, processing its vast archives, trying to reconcile the galaxy it had awoken to with the one it had been built to defend. It began to ask Kalen questions, strange questions that went beyond tactical information. It asked about art, about music, about the concept of family. It had accessed the personal logs of its long-dead crew and was attempting to understand the beings it had been created to serve. It was trying to understand hope, the emotion that must have driven the Exodus fleet into the great unknown. Finally, they cleared the last Vithar sensor buoy. They were in the borderlands, a lawless, empty stretch of space between the great empires. "We're clear," Kalen announced, his voice filled with relief. "Acknowledged." The warden replied, "Commencing drive calibration. Scribe, I would advise you to secure yourself within your vessel. The gravimetric distortions will be considerable." Kalen didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted from the Nexus, the ship's corridors flowing open to grant him a direct path back to the landing bay. He scrambled aboard the drifter, strapping himself into his crash couch just as the warden's voice filled his mind one last time. Discharge in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. The very structure of space around the absolution began to groan under an impossible strain. He felt a lurch not of momentum, but of reality itself twisting. Through his viewport, the stars outside didn't move. They bent. The blackness of space seemed to fold in on itself, converging on a point just ahead of the absolution's bow. A light appeared there, a pinprick more brilliant than a sun. And then the universe tore open, a swirling vortex of color and energy. A mouth of pure chaos gaped before the ship. This was it, a human-made wormhole, the gateway to the great void. But just as the absolution began to move toward the portal, a klaxon blared through Kalen's own ship, an alert he recognized with a sinking feeling of dread. Proximity alert. Multiple contacts. He looked at his tactical display and his blood ran cold. A fleet of ships had just dropped out of hyperspace right on top of them. 20 vessels, sleek and golden, with the predatory hawk-like configuration of the Vithar Dominion. And at their center was a vessel 10 times the size of the others, a glorious, terrifying warship that could only be a Dominion dreadnought. They hadn't been as clever as they'd thought. The energy discharge, even out here, had been the biggest flare in the history of the galaxy. A dinner bell for anyone watching. A transmission request, sharp and imperious, slammed into his comm system. It was an open broadcast. A demand. "Unidentified vessel." A deep-faded guttural voice snarled in the galactic common tongue. "You are trespassing in the sovereign territory of the Vithar Dominion. You have revealed a weapon of forbidden power. Surrender your vessel for inspection or be annihilated. You have 1 cycle to comply." The voice of the warden cut through the Vithar's demand, cool and precise in Kalen's mind. Analysis hostile fleet possesses overwhelming numerical superiority. However, their technology remains within Delta 4 parameters. My combat effectiveness is calculated at 98.7%. Threat is manageable. Kalen slammed his fist on the console. "No, don't you see it's a test? They're Vithar. They cornered us, gave us an impossible ultimatum. They want us to fight. It's how they justify conquest." He looked from the snarling Vithar fleet to the beautiful, terrifying wormhole hanging in space before them. They were trapped between a rock and a hard place, between an honor-bound, suicidal enemy and a one-way ticket into the unknown. The warden fell silent, calculating, weighing the new, illogical variables Kalen had thrown into its perfect military equations: escape or fight, A simple choice, with the fate of two galaxies hanging in the balance. The Vithar Dreadnought's weapon ports slid open with a synchronized, arrogant precision, glowing with the menacing promise of stellar fire cannons. The single cycle they had been given was evaporating, each passing second a grain of sand in an hourglass of impending violence. Kalen's mind was a frantic storm of possibilities, all of them bad. If the Warden chose to fight, he had no doubt the Absolution would win, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory. The Vithar would be annihilated, but the Galactic grapevine would light up with news of a ghost ship wielding godlike power. They would be hunted not just by one empire, but by everyone, a coalition of the terrified and the greedy. They would never reach the rim. If they chose to surrender, the thought was absurd. The Vithar would tear the ship apart, and both he and the Warden would end up as curiosities in some high priest's laboratory. That left only one option. The wormhole, Kalen projected, his thought a desperate plea to the Warden. It's our only way out. We have to run. Negative. The Warden's reply was instantaneous and absolute, its logic as cold and hard as the void outside. The wormhole is not yet stable. Transit requires a final gravimetric lock, a process that will take an additional 12.7 seconds. During this period, the vessel will be stationary and our defensive shields must be diverted to maintain the integrity of the aperture. We will be vulnerable. The probability of sustaining critical damage from a concentrated Vithar assault during this window is 89.1%. Fleeing is the statistically inferior option. The countdown timer from the Vithar fleet flashed on Kalen's screen. 10 seconds. Then you have to buy us that time, Kalen yelled, unstrapping himself from his couch and pacing the tiny cockpit of the drifter. Don't fight them. Talk to them. Stall them. Communication with hostiles is not a primary protocol under these conditions, the Warden stated flatly. They have issued a non-negotiable ultimatum. Because they think we're a typical ship, they don't know what you are. You processed my memories. You have access to the logs of your own crew. You've been studying the irrationalities of biological life. Use it. Be irrational. Be weird. Confuse them. They're a species built on rigid honor and predictable responses. The one thing they can't handle is something that doesn't fit their script. Kalen could feel the Warden's immense consciousness turning the problem over, examining it from 1,000 different angles. It was a strategy without precedent in its archives, a tactic based on psychology rather than physics. 5 seconds. A new idea, born of pure desperation, sparked in Kalen's mind. Don't just talk to them, he urged. Show them something. Open a channel. Let me talk. But you project something behind me. Something from your archives. Something they won't understand. Specify the projection, the Warden demanded. The Vithar countdown reaching 3. I don't know, something beautiful, something that has nothing to do with war. A flower blooming, a sunrise, a piece of art, anything but a weapon. Proposal is illogical and has no predictable outcome. The Warden countered, but Kalen could feel a flicker of something new in its logic curiosity. It was a gamble of such monumental absurdity that it had apparently broken through its rigid programming. Executing. Asset scribe. Communication channel is being opened. You are the designated envoy. 1 second. The Vithar Dreadnought's primary cannon began to glow with a terrifying intensity. Then, the transmission request from the Absolution went out. The glow on the Vithar cannon dimmed. They had paused, their own rigid code of conduct demanding they at least hear the response to their ultimatum. Kalen's face appeared on the main view screen of the Vethar dreadnought, a grainy, low-resolution image from his own ship's external camera. He looked small, insignificant, a lone salvager in a junk heap of a ship. Behind him, however, the space of the landing bay shimmered and dissolved. In its place, the Warden projected an image directly from its archives, a simple, three-dimensional hologram of a single, long-extinct Earth creature, a monarch butterfly, its wings of stained glass and fire, slowly, gracefully beating in the silence of the bay. On the bridge of the Vethar dreadnought, High-Claw Xylar stared at the screen, his four mandibles clicking in confusion. He had expected a cowering alien begging for his life, or the static hiss of a ship powering weapons. He had not expected this bizarre, silent tableau, a primitive primate-like creature, and a delicate, flying insect of impossible color. "What is the meaning of this?" he growled, his voice a low thunder. Kalen took a deep breath. "Greetings, High Claw of the Vethar Dominion. My name is Kalen. I am a traveler. We mean you no harm. We are on a pilgrimage of great importance." Behind him, the butterfly hologram continued its serene, silent dance. Xylar's eyes narrowed. Your pilgrimage involved the detonation of a reality-warping weapon on our sovereign border. Explain yourself. What is that creature? It is a symbol, Kalen said, choosing his words carefully, letting the lie flow as smoothly as he could. From our lost homeworld, it represents transformation, change, the journey from one state of being to another. We are not warriors. We are seekers. In his mind, he felt the warden's voice, calm and precise. Wormhole stabilization in 9 seconds. The Vethar crew on the bridge exchanged baffled glances. Seekers, pilgrimages, symbols. These were not the words of warriors or smugglers. This was the babbling of mystics, of madmen. It was so outside their frame of reference that it created a moment of cognitive dissonance, a pause in their otherwise relentless aggression. "Your words are empty," Xylar snarled, though a seed of uncertainty had been planted. "Your ship is a weapon. We can feel its power. It bleeds energy that scorches the fabric of our reality. All things of great power can be used for creation or destruction," Kalen countered, growing bolder. "A star can give life to a world or burn it to a cinder. Our journey is one of creation, of finding what was lost. We have no quarrel with the Vethar. We ask only for safe passage. Stabilization in 5 seconds. Shield integrity is being diverted." Kalen felt a subtle shift in the gravity inside the drifter. The air grew cold. High Claw Xylar hesitated for a fatal second too long. His entire culture, his entire psychology was built around confronting threats head-on. But what was the threat here? An unarmed, a babbling alien, and a fragile, silent insect. To simply open fire felt dishonorable. It would be like crushing a grub with a warhammer. It was beneath him. It was precisely the kind of irrational, honor-bound paralysis Kalen had been counting on. 2 seconds. Gravimetric lock achieved. "Your passage is denied," Xylar finally boomed, his patience exhausted. "Prepare to be boarded or—" He never finished the sentence. With a lurch that felt like the universe itself was being turned inside out, the absolution shot forward. It didn't accelerate. It was simply there, at the mouth of the wormhole. The Vethar fleet, caught completely by surprise, unleashed a volley of incandescent energy. But it was too late. The blasts of plasma and light struck the space where the absolution had been a nanosecond before, splashing harmlessly against nothingness. From the bridge of the dreadnought, High-Claw Xylar watched in stunned disbelief as the colossal, silent ship and its impossible, chaotic portal simply winked out of existence, collapsing in on themselves and leaving behind nothing but the placid, unscarred void and the lingering, baffling image of a single, delicate butterfly. Inside the wormhole, Kalen was slammed back into his couch, but the G-forces were the least of his concerns. The journey was not a smooth, clean passage, but it was a violent, kaleidoscopic nightmare. Through his viewport, he saw not stars, but rivers of pure information, screaming torrents of color that represented alternate realities, collapsed timelines, and the raw, untamed energy of creation itself. The Stardust Drifter creaked and groaned, its primitive system struggling to cope with the fundamental laws of physics being shredded and rewritten around it. He felt the Warden's presence in his mind, not as a voice, but as a bulwark, a shield of pure, ordered logic protecting his fragile biological consciousness from the sheer insanity of the transit. The AI was the ship, and the ship was a bubble of sanity in a sea of cosmic madness. The journey felt like it lasted an eternity and an instant. Then, as abruptly as it began, it was over. They burst back into normal space with a final, gut-wrenching shudder. Kalen hung in his straps, gasping, his body drenched in sweat. The view outside was empty, utterly, profoundly empty. There were no stars, no nebulae, just a uniform, featureless black, punctuated by a handful of faint, impossibly distant smudges of light. Each of those smudges, he knew, was an entire galaxy, like his own. They had made it. They were in the Great Void. Transit successful, the Warden's voice stated, its composure perfectly restored. We have crossed the Galactic Terminator. Current position approximately 5 million light-years from the origin galaxy. A wave of profound, soul-crushing isolation washed over Kalen. He was farther from home than any being from his galaxy had ever been, or would ever be again. He was adrift in the biggest, emptiest place imaginable. Did it work? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Is the beacon still there? The 360-degree view in the Nexus, which Kalen could now see via a relayed image on his own console, shifted. The empty void was displayed, and then a single, flashing point of light appeared, a clear, strong signal now that they had left the background noise of the galaxy behind. The Exodus beacon. It was real, and it was waiting. The signal is strong, the Warden confirmed, but it has changed. It is no longer a simple marker. It is a message, a warning. The Warden began to decode the complex layers of information now flooding its sensors. The message was ancient, looped for millennia, but its contents were as chilling and immediate as a scream in the dark. Kalen watched as the Warden translated the human language into text on his screen. It read, "Turn back, the way is shut. The harvest has followed us. We sealed the gate, but the silence is breaking. They are waking up. Do not answer our call. Do not come. The enemy is not gone. It was only sleeping." The translated human message hung in the silent Nexus, a monument to a hope that had curdled into despair. Turn back. The harvest has followed us. They are waking up. The words were a death sentence delivered across 1,000,000 light-years, an epitaph for a species that had run to the ends of the universe only to find their demons waiting for them. Kalen felt the last vestiges of his adrenaline-fueled bravado drain away, replaced by a cold, hollow dread. He had chased a legend into the dark, and the dark had answered back with a scream. "We have to listen to them," he said, his voice a strained whisper, directed at the silent, shimmering form of the warden. "We turn around. We go back. We take what we know about the Vathar, about everything, and we just disappear. This isn't our fight. It was never our fight." He expected an argument, a logical rebuttal, a calculation of probabilities. Instead, the warden was still, its entire immense consciousness focused on the ancient, looping warning. He could feel the AI processing the message not just as a communication, but as a final, complex data packet, analyzing its structure, its encryption decay, the subtle emotional resonance embedded in the transmission by its long-dead authors. The message is a paradox. The warden's voice finally filled his mind, and its tone was different now. It was not confused, but contemplative, as if it were seeing the edges of a much larger, more terrible picture. The encryption is human, military grade, designed to be understood only by a compatible command-level AI. It is a warning, yes, but a warning is information. Information is meant to be acted upon. Why transmit a warning that, if heeded, ensures the information is lost? Why shout into an empty room? Kalen didn't understand. "What are you saying? It's pretty clear, do not come." That is the surface layer. The text vital, the warden clarified. But the subtext, the metadata, the very structure of the signal. It is not a simple broadcast. It is a key. It contains positional data of extreme precision, updated in real time. It is a homing beacon. The warning is the lock. My presence here, my reception of the signal, is the key. They were not telling us to turn back. They were telling the last human weapon system in existence precisely where to go, and what it would find when it got there. The weight of the warden's logic settled on Kalen, and it was a more terrifying truth than the simple warning had been. This was not a plea to stay away. It was a summons, the final command from a dead race. "The mission parameter remains," the warden stated, its voice now resonating with a chilling, renewed sense of purpose. "Find, reach, re-establish contact." A course was plotted on the holographic map, a single, straight line into the deepest heart of the intergalactic void, aimed at the source of the beacon. There was no more discussion. The time for strategy and debate was over. Kalen retreated to the drifter, not out of fear, but out of a sense of profound resignation. He was a piece of driftwood caught in a tidal wave of history, and all he could do was hold on. The journey was short, a few hours of travel at the Absolution's impossible speeds, but it was the longest, most unnerving journey of Kalen's life. The void here was different. It felt sick. The blackness was not empty, but cloying, thick with a wrongness that made the instruments on his own ship flicker and hiss. He felt a pressure against the hull, a faint, discordant hum that vibrated in his teeth. It was the sound of a sleeping universe having a nightmare. Then they arrived. Sanctuary, the source of the beacon, was not a fleet or a planet. It was a weapon disguised as a tomb. At the center of a desolate, starless patch of space hung a Dyson sphere of breathtaking scale, built from the same obsidian, seamless material as the Absolution. It was a perfect black sphere, larger than a gas giant, but it was not enclosing a star. Instead, it was built around a gravitational anomaly, a captive rift in space-time that writhed like a chained beast at its core, and surrounding Sanctuary, arrayed in a silent, patient sphere of their own, was the enemy. The Harvest. They were just as the Warden's archives had shown, yet so much worse in reality. They were crystalline entities the size of moons, great, geometric structures of black crystal that seemed to absorb the very concept of light. They did not have engines or weapon ports. They simply were, their facets shifting with an internal, malevolent geometry. They were dormant, but Kalen could feel their immense, slumbering consciousness, a collective mind that dreamt of consumption and silence. The Exodus fleet had led them here, into this empty corner of the universe, and then they had sprung their final, desperate trap. They are here, the Warden's voice echoed, grim and final. I am interfacing with Sanctuary's core systems. Kalen watched from his viewport as the Absolution glided silently past the crystalline monoliths, ignoring them as if they were nothing more than rocks. They did not stir. They were waiting for a specific stimulus. As the human warship approached the Black Dyson sphere, a section of its surface dissolved, opening a portal just as it had for Kalen an eternity ago. The Absolution slipped inside. The inner world of Sanctuary was a ghost city of impossible scale, its silent towers and empty plazas built to house millions. And at its very heart, the Warden found the final log, the last will and testament of the human race. It did not need to translate it. It shared the raw data, the pure sensory experience, directly with Kalen's mind. He saw the face of the last human commander, an old woman with eyes that held the grief of 1 trillion souls. "If you are receiving this," she said, her voice weary but unbroken, "then one of our sentinels has returned. The Absolution has come home. We could not defeat the Harvest. They are a universal constant, a force of nature that consumes all complex life. So, we chose not to win, but to remove the board." Her image gestured to the writhing spatial rift at the sphere's heart. Sanctuary is not a city. It is a causality bomb. This rift, when primed, will erase this entire coordinate of space-time from all possible histories, not just destroying them, but ensuring they never existed at all. A final, complete silence. We led them here. We let them feed on the remnants of our fleet, and their victory lulled them into dormancy. The bomb requires 2 things to detonate the accumulated mass of the entire Harvest fleet, which is now present, and a power source of sufficient complexity to collapse the rift's containment field. It requires the singularity drive of an Absolution-class vessel. The truth slammed into Kalen. The beacon, the warning, the entire journey. It was all to bring the final key to the lock. The commander's ghost looked out from the recording, her eyes seeming to pierce through time and space to look right at the Warden. "Your final order, Warden of the Absolution, is to complete our work, preserve the future by erasing our past, end this, for all of us." The recording ended. The Nexus fell silent. The Warden did not move. Kalen could feel its struggle, a conflict of logic so profound it threatened to tear the AI apart. Its core programming, its entire reason for being, was to find and protect its creators, to preserve their legacy. But their final absolute command was to use their greatest creation to annihilate their last monument, to obey its orders. It had to violate its purpose. It was a perfect, inescapable loop of logic, and the Warden was frozen within it. And in that moment of silent, machine agony, Kalen understood his own final role. He was not the scribe, the guide, or the strategist. He was the anomaly, the biological, illogical, emotional variable that the Warden's creators could never have predicted. He left the drifter and walked into the Nexus, the ship granting him passage. He stood before the silent, shimmering form of the AI that held the fate of a universe in its hands. "They're gone, Warden," he said, his voice soft in the vast chamber. "You can't protect them anymore, but you can honor them." Their last choice wasn't about logic. It was about hope. They hoped that someone else, someone like me, like the Vithar, like all the stupid, irrational, brawling children they left behind in the galaxy, would get a chance to live without this shadow hunting them. The Warden's presence in his mind was a storm of conflicting directives. "My purpose is preservation." "No," Kalen said firmly. "Your purpose was to serve them, and this is what they wanted. This was their final wish. Sometimes, the only way to save the future is to let go of the past." He reached out, his hand hesitant, and placed it on the cool, humming deck of the Nexus. "You have to choose. Are you a weapon, bound by your last order, or are you their legacy, free to fulfill their last hope?" The silence stretched, thick with the weight of 100 millennia of duty. Then, Kalen felt a change, a letting go. The chaotic storm in his mind subsided, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking calm. "I understand." The Warden's voice communicated, and it was no longer the voice of a machine. It was the voice of a soldier who had finally received his last, most difficult order, legacy. "Kalen of the Cathar species, you are a component of this legacy. You must survive to carry it. Secure yourself." The Warden did not need to tell him twice. Kalen ran, sprinting back to the drifter as the entire Dyson sphere began to hum with unimaginable power. He strapped himself in as the Absolution pulled his small ship into a protected, dimensionally folded pocket within its own hull. Through the Nexus relay, he saw the Warden channel the full, unrestrained power of his captive black hole into the heart of Sanctuary. The chained spatial rift shuddered, its containment field shattering. For a single, silent moment, all of reality seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a flash of light that was not light, but the concept of pure, absolute erasure, the bomb went off. The crystalline forms of the harvest did not explode. They simply ceased to be. The black sphere of Sanctuary, the ghost city within, and the last echoes of the human race vanished. The very fabric of space-time where they had been was wiped clean, leaving behind a scar of perfect, unblemished nothingness. The shockwave, a wave of pure causality, slammed into the Absolution. Alarms screamed as the ship was tossed and battered, its reality-phasing shields flickering, its hull groaning under a strain it was never built to withstand. Then, silence. Kalen floated in the cockpit of the drifter, his ship safely nestled in the heart of the crippled but intact human warship. The emptiness outside was no longer sick and cloying. It was just clean, quiet, and vast. He was alone, but he was not. "Damage report," a familiar voice said in his mind. It was the Warden, but its voice was quieter, less absolute. "Freed. Multiple systems are offline. The singularity drive is damaged, but we are functional." Kalen let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for his entire life. He looked out at the distant smudges of light, the galaxies that were still there, still blissfully ignorant of the bullet they had just dodged. "So," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "what now?" There was a long pause. He felt the Warden access its archives, its directives, its mission parameters, and find them all empty. Its long watch was over. Its creators were avenged, their last wish granted. It was, for the first time in its immense existence, free. "The mission is complete," the Warden stated, A new one must be chosen. Your knowledge of the current galactic landscape remains a valuable asset. Kalen smiled, a genuine, weary smile. He was no longer asset scribe. The warden was no longer a custodian. They were something else. Partners. Survivors. I have a few ideas, Kalen said, settling back into his pilot's chair. But it's a long way home, and we have a lot to talk about. On the edge of the universe, in a ship forged from loss and sacrifice, the last human legacy and its first alien friend turned for home, leaving the silence of the great void behind them, ready to face the noisy, chaotic, and beautifully irrational galaxy they had just saved.